Chris, look, thanks very much for joining this Architect Tomorrow episode, the latest in our unboxing series, and I'm excited to talk to you about what's inside the box. All right, Chris, well, let's get cracking. Let's have a look at what we've got in here, because I think it's hopefully going to be very interesting to talk about. So let's do the unboxing. So in here, lose the packaging and
Cool, look at that.
It's Fruition. Anyway, what we have in here is Fruition. Is the trilogy of the Fruition books here.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited that you said yes to talk about these, because whilst I have already confessed to you I haven't read all of them cover to cover. Book number 2 I'm really passionate about. We'll get on to 2 in a minute. But let's kick off by talking about Fruition then. Book number 1. For those that haven't read the series, what I found really interesting about them was the fact that they are, I suppose, a fictionalized account of something that's a non-fiction topic. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, I have to tell you that I was offered a book contract somewhere in all of this story, just before I wrote Fruition, about 2 years before that, to write what would be considered a conventional business book. So laying out a proposition with some case studies and so on and everything else. And I set about it at the time with sort of enthusiasm, and then discovered fairly quickly I was no good at writing, and I'm no good at writing, shall we say, real business books. But it turns out, probably because my parents were storytellers, that once I got going, I was quite good at telling stories. And from things like learning scenario planning, which is storytelling, from being a fan of films, in which I learned some storytelling techniques, visual storytelling techniques and so on, I actually sat down one day back in 2005, it's a long time ago now, come back with me to 2005, and wrote for myself, as I was now in business, by then, working with people around the world, a scenario planning story.
Okay.
Which was at the time not supposed to be a book. It was only about 90 pages long. The books were about 215. They were all about exactly the same length for a certain reason. So that I could explore a scenario planning question. And if anyone knows about scenario planning, you write stories about something that has already happened.
Okay.
In which some surprising things happen. And they usually start with a question. So, to cut a long story short, there you go. No good at writing business books. Tried more than once. But quite good at writing stories. And so just kept practicing and doing that. And Fruition was never a book until one day a very kind publisher called Steve Hoberman, found out about me from someone else and said, I'd quite like to publish your short story as a book. Which was like, a book? He said, you're going to have to make it twice as long. So you're going to have an ending, because it was published in America where there's different convention for storytelling. Of course, you probably know that. It was kind of a European book where it kind of fell off a cliff at the end, so to speak. You had to guess what happened at the end, whereas it was published for the North American market, different cultures, so it's published in America. And he said, you've got to cut out all that swearing and sex. It's not appropriate. Because I've written it as if like people really sort of having relationships and talking to each other the way that people sometimes do. So we did all that, and a few months later it came out as Fruition. That was the title we chose. And the cover design, which you got, I've got one too, but there is. He has a cover designer called Mike Bry, who reads the books, who doesn't know what the subject is, and comes up with what he thinks the book's about. And it's kind of interesting to see what he comes up with. So Mark Bry came up with that twisted wires short circuit thing.
I was going to ask you about the cover. And the other thing throughout the series, as we'll kind of see, is the sort of emphasis of two letters as well. And
that's right.
I've always assumed, because this is the first one in the series, it's kind of, the tagline here is creating the ultimate corporate strategy for information technology. So for me, it was always the kind of IT and the sort of business and IT strategy.
Yeah.
But is there another hidden meaning behind the?
Well, it's not very hidden. There are. You can read all. In fact, the whole pattern to the writing style that the books, all the 3 books plus the final encore we've just published, are written to, it provides sort of stories within stories. So that if you explore it deeper, you probably find more to it than if you just read it on the surface. That was deliberate in the writing style. So when you see Fruition with IT in the middle, clearly it is referring to IT as information technologies.
Yeah.
But it doesn't take you, if you read the book and find out what the narrator is called, his name is Ian Taylor.
Right.
Who is an IT director or CIO.
Okay.
And even the letters IT, in the real world of business, actually don't mean one thing. And I think I'm going to say this now because it's very, very crucial to put across the meaning of what you see. Is that back when I wrote Fruition, what's the value of IT was kind of the big question out there in the market. And people are coming up with all sorts of interesting calculations that came to 42 or some other number about the value of IT. But actually, from working in IT in a company, then working with people in IT, on the one hand, IT, and still does stand for information technologies, hardware, software, networks, and so on. On the other hand, it's also a collection of people within a company, usually called the IT department, with the CIO or IT director. The value of your IT department and the people in it is an entirely different question from the value of information technologies you use. And to a great extent, Fruition is about the former, the value of the IT people, rather than the information technologies, which only get a brief mention occasionally, the technologies.
Yeah.
So, and that's something of passion of mine, is we've got all these capabilities that are usually in the IT department, many of which are actually not specifically about IT at all. They're about strategy and architecture, portfolio management, business analysis, and so on. And it's the value that those people can bring to an organization, including the CIO, that essentially those books are about and what they explore. And
strategy is obviously the key kind of piece of the book, but what I really like is the types of strategy that you kind of talk about. So here I've kind of got the pyramid or the triangle here of environmental, operational, and technical, and organization. I think a lot of people just sort of think of IT strategy and they think of the business bit of it and the technology bit of it, whereas the kind of contextual things that you've also sort of framed in here I found really, really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I conceived of that when I was talking with different people at different parts of the world, different companies about this subject, about strategy in IT. And if I go in and sit with, say, usually a CIO to begin with, Chief Information Officer, and say, tell me about your strategy for IT. Let's assume for a minute they jump up to their whiteboard and draw some kind of picture. All right, or write some notes. And you'd notice that some of them would draw an organizational chart. Others would sort of start drawing the sort of architecture diagram of the IT systems. Others would talk about the budgets and things. And others would talk about sort of the world out there and what was happening. And so this kind of like, it resembles other models you'll find. It's not, it's an interpretation of things you'll find elsewhere. But it really reflects the sort of conversations people prefer to have about this thing called strategy. So for those of us who sort of work with different people, it's a good idea to find out how they see strategy before we start to talk about it.
Yep. No, a common language, right? Right. Let's carry on with the unboxing. Let's come to the as I said, the book that how I discovered the series was Recreation, and we can sort of argue whether it's recreation or recreation.
I have nothing to argue about. You call it what you like.
I came across this, and I said to you the other day, I read it over a weekend or about 4 days because I just couldn't put it down. I just found it a riveting kind of read of how someone had put my job at the time. I was fairly new into the enterprise architect sort of role. I think I'd moved. I was still sort of on that solution to enterprise architect kind of journey. Yeah. And I just sort of found it a really interesting way of sort of getting into the mindset, I suppose, of an enterprise architect, and also the CEO kind of character as well in here. Yeah. How did this book come about? Did you always have? You wrote the first one. Did that just go really well? And someone say, "Can you talk about enterprise architecture?" Or did you always have this one in mind? What's the story behind it?
Okay, I mean, apart from when I started writing Fruition, I never had any book in mind, apart from the ones I felt to write. Okay, but so it's a bit like, I suppose, Star Wars or Back to the Future. Is you write the first story, and it comes to an end. It might leave a gap for something else to happen. Were there to be ever future stories? Right. That's more Back to the Future than Star Wars if you're doing films. But in the end, you see what happens, and if it does well, then you've got a chance to write some more stories. So Fruition is a kind of complete story. It comes to an end. There is a few sort of hints at the end as to where it might go next, if anything happened. So it was only when that did okay, in fact, it very well, I should say, that the publisher and I said, okay, so we need some more then. Now, the enterprise architect character in Fruition, a guy called Simon, he's kind of a sort of bit player in the story. If you actually read Fruition, you think, well, I mean, he's mentioned in the first sentence as him, whoever he is, and he's Simon. And he kind of comes and goes from the story. He kind of writes himself out in a way through a bit of unusual behaviour. But Steve said to me, the publisher, he said to me, I've read this book and I think we should fire Simon. And this is like us talking about some fictional characters as if they're real. So I took that and I thought, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to make Simon narrate the second story. Now we're going to have one. And he, I'll give the plot right here. A little bit. He leaves the company he worked for in London at the end of Fruition, and a bit annoyed. He's a bit annoyed and he leaves. Right. Anyway, so it gives us the opportunity to transfer him across to New York City and start working with that CEO. His name's Michael, who turns into his mentor in enterprise architecture, strangely. So Simon he doesn't get fired, he leaves, and he turns up in New York and off he goes. And his first observation, which starts to undo his sense of what he's about, is it turns out the chief executive thinks he's got the same job as Simon has.
Yeah, and that was one of my big sort of takeaways, was the sort of parallel behind enterprise architecture in its truest sense, like outside of the IT department, thinking about the future vision and the potential, roadmap and all that sort of stuff for the organization as a whole, isn't that far removed from that of the CEO, the overall leader, particularly as they sit from the same sort of overarching viewpoint, I suppose.
That's indeed. So whereas Fruition was actually about time and money, basically, for reasons that if you read the book, it sort of starts to come out. So for example, the chapter headings are bits of calendar. The second one turned out to be a travelogue, a journey. It's sort of a journey about a journey, even. It's a bit sort of convoluted.
Right.
In which this fellow Simon turns up in New York. He suddenly finds himself with the chief executive saying they've got the same job. And the chief executive knows about enterprise and he knows about architecture. It so happens, as in buildings and bridges and things. So he sends our hero off on a world tour, learning about the company, the global company, working with people, and actually discovering a new sort of level in enterprise architecture, with the mission of integrating EA into mainstream business management.
Right.
And that kind of is what the point of that is, rather than it's some separate thing.
And I think we're still struggling with that even today, right? The other things I really loved about the book was some of the amazing sort of diagrams and visuals.
Thank you.
The models and things that you've got in here, like the EEA, I really like as well. The kind of extending that to kind of establish, explore, activate, and apply as that way of, as you say, of merging the EA thinking into business strategy thinking. That's one of the reasons I couldn't put it down. Was I saw this as almost like a way of melding those two. Sometimes that feel like completely opposite worlds when, as we've already said, they shouldn't be, because they should kind of work quite harmoniously together. But I think there's a lot of confusion about what EA is and where they sit. And as I say, that debate is still happening, even now, even though these books are a few years.
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, because some things take a long time to change. Either they change by themselves or somebody manages to change them. So some of the things. Those books were written probably around about 2008, 10 and 12. And some of those things are sort of a bit different. Some of the things we talk about today were hinted at in those books because they were emerging, like Agile, but they weren't actually mentioned at all. But some of them seem to take a long time to do anything about, such as life, and some things might never change. But the idea is still a scenario planning story that says, so the first book had a question, the second book had a question, which was, who in truth are the architects of your enterprise?
Right.
And it turns out there's lots and lots of people are the architects of the enterprise, and the whole point is to get them collaborating together as much as possible, rather than the enterprise architects, capitals, are the enterprise architects.
I actually think that's really important, sort of fast forwarding to today, because I'm actually working on a blog or two, couple of articles for architecture and governance. And one of the conclusions we've come to is the world now, architecture doesn't just exist within the architecture function. It's an activity that a broad group of stakeholders need to kind of get behind and collaborate on. So I think that concept very much applies to where the world is today, because there's just too much architecture to do for it just to be a limited, finite number of people.
That's right. That's absolutely right. I think the other thing, the way to look at it is that companies are somehow looking after their own architectures, well or badly, without enterprise architects.
Yep.
So before, the late 80s, when enterprise architecture became a named subject, people were designing companies and running companies, and they seem to work, some of them, and not others. So the question sort of really then is, when you've got all this unofficial, informal enterprise architecture going on, because it still goes on today, what does formal enterprise architecture and people called enterprise architect bring to that party? Because they've got to do something additional that actually impacts the performance of the company beyond what other people can do collectively anyway.
I've heard of an interesting sort of analogy, which is a bit like a gardener. You can have as you say, you can have an organization or have a garden without a gardener. Yeah. It will kind of, the garden will emerge and sort of evolve. Whereas the architect is someone that's sort of thinking about, the parts of the garden. And a bit like the other analogy that's used quite a lot of time, I suppose, is the town planner, isn't it? The town planner, and they're kind of thinking about what the street layout, street scene might look like, and versus the solution architect that maybe is designing the individual house. So I get what you're saying there around organizations will have architecture. It's just how much is someone thinking about the roadmap and the journey that the organization's perhaps going on.
Yeah, that kind of, yes, you're right, absolutely right. And actually, if you go to sort of town planning or city planning, if you take it out a level and say, what if the city, metaphorically, is the market, and our enterprise is one of the buildings in the city? So it's got to sort of interact with everything else going on in the city, rather than our enterprise is the city. I mean, that's
so
where it came
about
from.
An ecosystem.
That's where we get to ecosystem thinking.
Yeah.
Where our enterprise is sort of part of a networked ecosystem structure called a market or something else.
Yeah.
And we've got to understand what role it plays in the market. Why does it exist at all? What does it bring to the market? Why does it bring that? To then figure out how best to design that enterprise. And as things come along, particularly things like e-business back in the 2000s and so on, is how do we then redesign our enterprise to continue to sort of add value to the market, to grow value from the market with that ecosystem type thinking. So I know other people must be doing it at the time, but back in Recreation, which you showed me, or it might have been in the follow-up book, DefrICtion, annotated the market architecture, because there is one, as an ecosystem. And that's back in about 2010.
That's interesting, because I wrote a piece, I think, in 2017, talking about, is the next evolution of enterprise architecture to think ecosystem. And I think the world going more and more digital has meant that the ecosystem's bigger than it was before. I think we're
completely.
Yeah, I mean, it's now a global ecosystem. Truly, that's the exciting thing, really, I suppose, about working in technology and architecture is the kind of almost endless possibilities that come from that ecosystem. So getting people to think in that sort of mindset rather than the organizational boundaries, I think is quite key. So
I think it's also worth saying, so with that in mind, is that quite a lot of what you read in those books, some of the throwaway comments that people make are actually one of the things to look out for. It's part of, again, my writing style. Apparently it's my speaking style, which I haven't noticed, or somebody pointed me out to be in Denmark about 5 years ago. The odd throwaway comment turns out to be the thing you should be listening for, or looking for. So it's almost a throwaway comment in Recreation. Is the chief executive is talking with Simon, the enterprise architect, at an airport, and they're starting to compare notes, get to know each other.
Yeah.
And so the chief executive says to Simon, the architect, so you're an IT guy, right? And Simon's going, no, I used to be an IT guy. Now I'm more of a process guy. So the chief executive, who's sort of about 10 steps ahead always, because chief executives usually are, he goes, process. Well, let's tell you about my process principle. The customer has the process. We just have to figure out how to appear in it. And off he goes. And of course, that is a bit of a throwaway comment, but for people in the world of process who imagine that the customer appears in the process, that we design their experiences, is way back in 2010 when I was published. There's always a proposition that we as an enterprise appear in the customer's process, and they're already having the experience by the time we get there. It's like, and that there's a couple of things people always pick up, or often pick up in Recreation, one of which you maybe mentioned, the CEO, the chief enterprise architect, but this throwaway comment almost that the customer has the process. We just have to figure out it's no longer a user experience anymore. You see, the experience is already happening. So even so, other books kindly sort of a friend of mine called Milan Gwenza wrote a book called Intersection, and him and a few other people. It's interesting to see what people quote you on, by the way, in the end. If you ever write anything or say anything, even within an organisation, it doesn't have to be a book that's published. When you see what people actually quote from your work, think, that's what they got from it. And it was actually a sort of a throwaway comment along the way to start explaining the model that you showed them as to why it's the way it is.
Yeah, I think that's a really nice point then to perhaps get the third book out, because whilst I must confess this is the one I haven't actually read yet, I do look forward to actually reading it. But this one is about, my understanding is this is about creating value from change, and so
that's right.
Kind of overcoming that inertia and kind of making things kind of happen. Talk to us a little bit about DefrICtion then.
DefrICtion, okay. There's anyone with a made-up word on the cover?
So it's not actually a real word. Oh yeah, I guess
it's not a real word. I made it up. I had to make that one up. But of course, the IC is that firstly, that's about investing in change.
Okay.
And it's also about investment culture and all sorts of other ICs that might appear somewhere if you find them. That's the pattern of these things, and it's sort of a clue again that there's depth to all of the stories if you want to see them. So let's assume it's about investing in change. Okay, so that's the first IC.
Yeah.
And that's where it always comes together in organizations, is from all the work that architects do and business analysts do and portfolio managers do and so on, it either pops out of the end of your investments in change as what you needed or it doesn't. And the value either comes from those changes or it doesn't. And if you go all the way back to Fruition, it is a saga. It is a sort of, once you get going, there's the same people appear, or some of the same people appear, and then a lot of the same themes keep recurring, and some of the same storylines occasionally recur in a different context, because that's life, it does. So that's a chief executive, global chief executive narrates that, and I've never been a global chief executive of an organization bigger than one. Okay, so, but I have fortunately had the privilege to work with lots of them and talk with lots of them and people who work with them and try and put myself in the mind of the chief executive. And one of the things it does in certain aspects, it considers how important or not this might be, all of this, to somebody who's a global chief executive and why it might be important to him or her. So it's about investing in change. It's about bringing together two separate but complementary roles, enterprise architecture and investment portfolio management, into a brand new function that most people never heard of, called enterprise investment.
Right.
But such functions have existed because I've helped people invent them. I've worked with them without inventing them. They're not always called enterprise investment, but it's enterprise architecture and investment portfolio management creates a singular function.
No, I've seen it. I've seen variations of this. So
Absolutely.
I worked in an organization that had program architecture, for example, and that was very much a sort of program architects working with portfolio managers and directors of change. And so I think, throughout my career, one of the most important relationships, or one of the important stakeholder relationships to build and maintain, has been with that program management sort of function, the change management function, because ultimately, otherwise, architecture can be a very nice picture, right? A very nice potential story about the future, but unless you engage with the change makers in the organization, you don't affect the change that you really want to see get realized. So I think I've moved in my maturity of thinking from, I really need to kind of know the engineering function really, really well, because it's all about the technology. It's all about the technology architecture. I realized, I think, when I was getting it more when I actually started working more with the business stakeholders that ultimately were the key decision makers behind certain changes, and also the portfolio managers. So I think this book will probably resonate a lot with my experience.
So the one thing that book adds into the whole story, more than many things, is the idea that your organization has a culture when it comes to investing in change, and it provides a tool, if you like, a way of understanding the very facets of your culture, and therefore why your investments you're making in change might be doing well or badly or whatever, in a way that otherwise you wouldn't know. So investment culture appears there. In fact, it's the hero from the first book, Ian Taylor. He turns up in DefrICtion. It educates the chief executive in one dinner and a morning session about this whole thing about investment culture, which Ian Taylor has learned somewhere else along the way with some other people.
And do you think this plays well into the kind of transition we've seen a lot of organizations taking more of a product and agile sort of methodology to change management? So the investment culture is more about sort of setting aside the right sort of resources to make the right change happen, rather than old school, very prescriptive program management and project management, which was, very waterfall in nature. What does the book sort of touch on that sort of tool?
The mechanism by which people deliver change isn't explored much in the book. What it does recognise is what was called, they're all called projects back in 2012 when that book came out. Quite a lot of people don't call them projects now, even if they are, because we want to call them releases and so on. That's okay. So at the time, they're all called projects. And there's an observation that comes in the book a couple of times, that each project is in fact two. There's the investment project and there's the implementation project. Okay. Now, if you think, we architects can sort of easily sort of produce metaphors for people, or analogies for people, and say, when you're building a building, there's an investment project going on in which you're putting some money and other things into the project. What you want out the other end is some return on your investment. That's one project, in which then, once you're ready, you start digging a big hole and start building something. All right, that's the implementation project. They are completely different capabilities. Okay. They're obviously interconnected, and usually run by different people because they're very different. And indeed, there'd be a conflict of interest if the builders were running the investment project. So that's one way of putting it. People. Okay. While each project, and indeed each change, is in fact two, when you look at it that way. So if you take Agile as being sort of incremental, iterative change, small scale, 2 weeks or whatever, is that each Agile change is in fact two. One of which is the investment that the product appears in. The other is the implementation of the product update. Okay.
Okay.
And what I know, I mean, what I want to say about IT departments goes back to the value of IT people rather than IT technology, is there's a recurrent or repetitive, perhaps repetitive, thing that happens with IT departments in quite a lot of places. They find or come up with absolutely brilliant ideas for how to make things work better in their companies. They implement them in the context of IT and then try and spread them out to the rest of the organization. So project management being one of them, formalized project management, formalized in the context of IT, using Prince 2 and so on, then try and spread it out. And often it hits a kind of boundary beyond which it doesn't go. And then there's enterprise architecture, you see, trying to spread that out, portfolio management, spread that out. And then we get Agile, trying to spread it out. And there's a repetitive thing which we need to be noticing, that if we do this right, then of course we could test something like Agile in the context of delivering IT products. But if we want to become enterprise agility rather than IT product delivery agility, we've got to be certain that it can, when the time comes to spread it out, it can in fact spread.
Well, it's a different kind of thinking, isn't it? To kind of think about the agility of go-to-market and marketing campaigns versus delivery of cloud-based software. I mean, unless you're marketing cloud-based software, of course, there might be a bit more alignment then. But even still, the different sort of capabilities of different sort of jobs and different sort of cultures within those sort of parts of the organisation, aren't they?
Absolutely. And that's where, we have to be really good at culture, because if the IT people have found or come up with this brilliant idea, which they often do, we often do, and they get it going in IT, because that sounds really good. Even the chief executive say, make sure everybody can do it. Right. And then for some reason, you just can't.
Yeah.
There's something about the way that the culture of the company invests in change, it just can't find its way into, or gets rejected when it tries.
And actually what springs to mind now is what's happened with the pandemic, of course, where for a long time, IT departments have been trying to push things like Teams and Zoom and various other things, right? And some organizations have been pretty successful, particularly the global ones, but I don't think it's really seen the light of day like the pandemic has forced it.
That's true. I mean, products like that, absolutely. Yeah. So on the other hand, Microsoft's pretty good at pushing Teams, and whoever makes Zoom, I've forgotten to make Zoom, probably Zoom, are good at pushing Zoom. So the IT department starts to, if they're not careful, look like kind of agents of the IT suppliers. When the IT suppliers are extremely good at pushing their own products, so they probably don't need many IT departments to do it for them, honestly. And I think I want to bring you all the way back, if I may, see if this works. Before I wrote Fruition, there's a little bit of a story before that, because I'd come out of a job a few years earlier, in which I'd already worked with a few CIOs in different companies and so on, and launched myself at an unsuspecting world and started to travel around and work with all sorts of people. And I started to notice sort of strange patterns to the way people were doing IT strategy, as it was called at the time. So in 2003, come back with me, 2003, I commissioned an independent survey where some other people, based on 8 questions that I gave them, interviewed CIOs or equivalent in sort of 100 of the biggest users of IT in those days. And what I want to sort of stress with what I'm about to say is that sometimes people don't seem to know what their IT department is for. And even the IT department might get confused sometimes with what it's for. And this does link to Agile, I promise you. So give me a little bit of space and I'll explain. Okay, so not all the 8 questions, but so from that survey way back 18 years ago, all right, so it's old stuff, but it was what came out. So first question of the CIO or equivalent was, who does your chief executive hold accountable for the value that the company creates from IT? Of which 63% of the CIOs said, me. Okay, there you go. That sounds about right to me, but that's about right. Other people said the CFO, and in fact, in 2% of the cases, somebody said nobody. So that's good. Okay, so we've got the 63% of CIOs when asked say, I'm the person accountable for the value the company creates from IT. Okay, so one of the next questions, it weren't quite in this order. It was a good survey, it was all sort of triangulated and so on. Says, okay, so what is the main focus of your company's strategy for IT? This is all multiple choice answers. And 69% of same CIOs said the main focus of our strategy is operations and service management. Okay, start to notice a slight disconnect here if you're with me. 1% said it's delivery of business value. That's the focus of our strategy. So the survey was actually called 1 in 100 at the time because of that. And other matters that were important at the time still are. No % said budgeting and cost management, and no % said architecture. as to what the focus of their company strategy was for IT.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, key with me, all right? So in case this is still happening, in case anything like this is still going on, ask the CIO with a multiple choice answers, what is your primary role in your organization? Is it, for example, a business expert, the business expert in how to create value from IT? 1% said that. Is it to be a kind of provider of IT systems and services to the rest of the organization? Well, it tends to be a supplier. 8% said that. 90% said both of those. I'm the business expert how to create value from IT, and I'm a provider of IT systems and services. That's okay. If you ask the finance director, are you the business expert creating value from finance? Yes. Are you a provider of finance systems and services also? Yes. But which of those is their primary role? Because in this case, both was 90%. Now you couple that with the main focus of the strategy being operations and service management, yet 63% of CIOs said, I'm the one accountable for the value we create. And then we start to see there's a disconnect here somewhere between what the CIOs want to be valued for, are actually accountable for, goes on to the strategies that they are leading are not about that. They're about operations and service management, which are hygiene, honestly. They're extremely complicated, consume a lot of resources and lots of people, do a job that I could never do, but unfortunately hygiene. So the systems are up and they're running okay and projects are delivering on time. Good. Now what are we doing? Because that's how it's supposed to be. And then their primary role is, and at the time, the IT department couldn't figure out whether it was actually supposed to be the business experts in creating value from IT or providers of IT systems and services, therefore suppliers like IBM. I figured out, and what you might go back to the Fruition trilogy and eventually back to Agile, okay, is that the IT department is actually at least 2, if not 3, entirely different departments, all called IT with one leader. It can work that way as long as we manage it that way. So working with CIOs way back in the early 2000s right up to now, it's like you've got the business experts in creating value from IT. Who are they? Whether it's strategists, as long as that's what they focused on, your architects, your portfolio managers, as long as that's what they're focused on. You've then got some people focused on sourcing IT systems and services from whoever supplies them.
So the vendor management sort of side of things.
That kind of thing, but including internal supply.
Right.
And then you've got the actual internal external supply, which is kind of should be a cloud-based approach these days, because you should be finding supply wherever you best can get it, whatever you need. That model, by the way, is in DefrICtion. You can see it. So when you see that, there's a value chain model that's based on. So we've got an agile team, and they've been taught well. They do a great job. They've got everything running as it should be. Who now want to push that out to make sure we actually end up with a more agile enterprise. But if their focus is on operations and service management, delivery of products and services, that's of almost no interest to everybody else who wants to be agile in terms of when they're talking about IT. So the big step for agile, if it's coming inside out, is to be able to sort of put aside all the mechanisms by which we deliver IT products and start again and say, so we want to be more agile. What do we need to be more agile at, and why? Because just be more agile will get you nowhere.
No, you're right. There's this kind of difference, isn't there, between agile delivery of technology and business agility. And there may be some linkage between those two, but I think you're right. There's almost a over obsession on the delivery methodology at the expense of where is the organization headed and how does it get there. That's the vacuum I've seen. I think we're coming out of that vacuum a little bit. I did see a lot of the energy going into it. We just need to be agile and everything will follow as long as we're agile.
I think get to Locomotion, the 4th book in the trilogy, which is just a shorter 41-page follow-up. There's a model in there which is building on model as you saw starting in recreation and goes through DefrICtion of a process by which you invest in change. So you start with an idea, you end up with some outcomes or some value. And the question of agile delivery of IT is one when we get to know what IT we might need and by when we need it, and how certain we are in what we need, then we should be choosing between let's just improvise, let's be waterfall, let's be agile, let's make up something new. Because we need more than one way of integrating change into our organization at different speeds and for different reasons. That makes us agile with a small a when it comes to investing in change. If we only have one way of integrating change in our organization, only one velocity we can go at, even if it's fast, it might be too fast. If that doesn't make us agile. funny enough. I just want to say that the people doing Agile are doing, I mean, the energy in that initiative, and it goes back a long way, I know, is extraordinary, and we should admire what I admire what they're achieving. What I'm concerned about now, of course, is the architectural question that we consider is, if we have Agile delivery of IT products here, and we want to be more Agile in various places out here, does this translate into that straight, or do we have to sort of put that aside for a minute? And my experience is we do say, we know those people, they're doing a great job, but they themselves probably can't teach us how to be Agile. We need to sort of figure out what we believe the agility is we need, and then those changes we need to invest in to become
that was going to be my next point, is that difficult sort of advice that we give back to leadership to say, if you want to be more Agile and compete, keep up with your competitors or enter new markets, whatever it might be, these are the difficult decisions and choices we're going to need to make about the investments we need to make, or the changes we need to make to legacy systems or processes or people and teams, whatever it might be. I'm glad you spoke about Locomotion, because that was going to be my next question for you, actually. So you've
I'm good at this, aren't I? You notice I'm dropping in it.
You
might notice the story. Exactly. The storyteller is dropping in the next bit of the story.
Yeah, no, it's great. You short circuited the thing, which was my point going to be. Is my understanding from where we talked before is it's about using data to shortcut, the kind of circuits through the company. And you were talking to me about disintermediating.
It's a hard thing to say.
So yeah, it's a difficult word.
It's a hard thing to say.
Disintermediating the company, which I think is really interesting, because I think the rise of things like cloud applications and software as a service means that businesses can just go out there, buy something, use their own data, and it's really interesting, isn't it, to see the sort of federated nature of technology versus the centralization. And of course, we've touched on why it makes sense perhaps to have a bigger view, a central view of where things are headed. But then ultimately, perhaps some delegation of the running of different parts makes more sense for that to be closer to the functions. Is any of that sort of aligned with what you were saying, or have you got?
Well, let's see. Let me tell you what you would read in Locomotion, and let's see if we can bring those together. So. Locomotion is the encore to a saga that finished in 2012. So I wrote it in the last few months to kind of like reflect on some things that happened in between, and keep going with the scenario planning type stuff. So what you see is always going to be something that's based on a reality, but also some suppositions all integrated into one story. And it's almost up to the reader to decide which they think is real, which is supposition. Now, I'm going to declare a little bit of a spoiler here. The chief executives that you met in Recreation, by the time Locomotion has come along, has unfortunately, and I mean this seriously, it's not a real guy, but it's died. Such is change.
Right.
I mean, such is change. So there's the chief financial officer, his name was Howard, takes over from his friend, who was his friend as chief executive. And he makes an observation to his enterprise investment team, who at the time consist of a sort of strategist, portfolio manager, and an enterprise architect. He says, there's something very wrong with how we're dealing with change. Okay, and they're all sitting there looking at him and going, and so he carries and said, people seem to think that change is unusual. Well, it isn't, is it? It's all part and parcel of running a business and living our lives. And where he's going with this, he's a former chief financial officer, where he's going with this at the opening of Locomotion, is he wants the team to come up with a new way of handling change as an integral part of the way the company runs. So those models that we've always used as run the business, change the business, he's the chief financial officer. He can reject that, can't he? Go, well, I don't know. I've decided that it's all running the business. So, okay, so the team has to come up with an innovative way of doing governance. Okay, now they're a global company, and they use the example of a marketing manager sitting in Australia while the executives are sitting in an office in New York City. And they say, well, they're all working on the same goals, all of these people, the global goals, and they're all sort of achieving or not achieving these goals day in, day out. And in the existing governance structure, it's all a bit sort of long-winded. You don't know until it's too late you aren't achieving your goals. Right. And changes, there's one governance structure, operations another. So he gets the team off, he sends them off to do their thing, he gives them a week in which to come up with something and then shortens it, because that's the way it is. And so it's the architect, a guy called Ivan, who you met in Recreation, who suddenly says, let's short circuit the company using data. Somebody says, do you mean disintermediating the management structure? He said, well, it might be, or it might be proving the value of all the intermediary managers. Because why shouldn't the executives be working off the same data live or near live as the people in Australia? I mean, so there's examples of spreadsheets and so on in there in which they're dummy, but based on the experiences I've had of being with executives and being once upon a time an operational manager years and years ago, is what would operational managers be looking at, putting in as data about what's going on today with operations and change, link the company's goals, and how does it translate all the way back and roll up to what the executives see within a few hours?
I think it's beautiful, isn't it, in an age where we're finally getting to a level of maturity where technology can provide that layer cake, can't it? And it's certainly true of where I work, where that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to make technology management and cybersecurity essentially data-driven. So at every level, whether it's the cybersecurity specialist or the systems manager, they have their kind of really low-level telemetry and capability, but then that can roll up into the sort of risk management and into kind of board committees that think about cybersecurity risk and so on and so forth. So clearly that's technology is a step ahead because it's data is the lifeblood. But I'm sure that will with analytics and other things that will come for the sales function and marketing and other areas. Data is driving those areas as well. So look, it's been great talking to you. But
Thank you. Likewise.
It's been a great conversation as I thought it would, because the books have been fascinating to kind of read through. In closing, we've talked a lot about the books, so I'd love for you to tell people perhaps where the best place is for them to get hold of a copy, and actually talk to us a little bit, just quickly, talk to us a little bit about the difference perhaps between your thinking of the print versions that you can get hold of versus what the difference is with perhaps the digital version.
Yeah, okay. The print, they were originally designed for print, so because it's 2008. But you printed a book, you sold it on Amazon and other places. So actually the print versions are laid out in a certain way that those themselves are designed to sort of be part of the story. It's silent, but for example, there are gaps between the lines, which are supposed to be suggestive to reading between the lines if you want to. And we did that very carefully, chapter headings and so on. Right. So they are really designed to be read as print books. Because they're Kindle versions, they're even audiobooks. So the audiobooks are slightly different because you can't show any diagrams in the audiobook. Right. So the value of it is the diagram. So there's slight differences in the story because of audiobooks. But the Kindle version, of course, it's Kindle and it does things for you, which some people value. Of course, you can search and highlight things. But if you're answering on this question, the best place to get books today is from the publisher's website. Okay. Where we have the PDFs, the original PDFs of the print books available. Right. For much less money you pay for the print books, and then you've got your own electronic copy, plus Locomotion, which is only available for free. I'll include a link as well so people can get to that. Yeah, exactly. And that by far is the best way to have the books now, because you can read them on your phone, you can read them on the book. If you want to get the Kindle versions of Amazon, fine. The books I've got, there we are, apart from the same as you. And that's what they were designed for originally, see. But now Locomotion exists as only a PDF. It kind of got us thinking. Yeah. Perhaps they should all just be available as PDFs, so they are, and then that's it. So I'd say that's the best place and the best way to get them. Okay, great stuff, Chris. Well, look, thanks again for your time. It's been a great chat. Yeah. And look forward to speaking to you again soon. You too, Oliver. Thanks ever so much. Cheers. Thank you. Bye.